Welcome everyone, both to our panel in London and to our audience in person and online, to this event to launch the Mission Zero Coalition's latest report, which focuses on the path to industrial decarbonisation in the UK. At AVEVA, we have been delighted to participate in this project and come together with a diverse range of other companies, industry bodies and research institutions, all involved in the challenge of delivering this wholesale revolution in our industrial sector, and in particular to share our perspective on the role of digitisation in advancing progress. For those not familiar with AVEVA, we produce software for the industrial world to help our customers design, engineer and operate complex industrial assets, from nuclear power stations to shipyards to pharmaceutical manufacturing. Some of our customers are in the hard-to-abate sectors, and we're working with them to reduce the energy intensity of their operations and improve the efficiency with the materials that they use. We're also working on many renewable energy projects, including here in the UK, to help to optimise output, particularly in our burgeoning growth sector of offshore wind, whether that's using our design tools to help create wind turbines that can withstand the awesome power of the North Sea, or deploying our data infrastructure and predictive analytics tools to model how weather patterns will impact turbines for optimum efficiency. We're especially excited to be involved in helping to refine the engineering operations of emerging clean technologies at the prototype or demonstration phase, including small modular reactors, fusion, synthetic fuels, and of course, clean hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, which have been a particular focus of the Mission Zero network, to consider how to rapidly scale up these critical industries in the UK as keystone technologies in broader industrial decarbonisation. This is not an easy pathway, but from our perspective, working with our customers, we see a story of ingenuity and innovation and a huge potential for progress that will bring about not only decarbonisation, but increased productivity in a connected industrial economy, where we can leverage technology to establish a new paradigm for industry here in the UK and elsewhere. But optimistic as we are, the rate of progress will depend on establishing the right policy frameworks, the right mix of regulations and incentives. And this is a complex challenge, requiring careful coordination right across our economy. And we must be aware that we are operating in a global market for investment. At AVEVA, we are already involved in live clean hydrogen and carbon capture and storage projects in the US, Germany, China. But here in the UK, progress has been slower. The work of the Mission Zero network to identify how best to galvanise greater momentum in these sectors is so urgently needed, because rising to the challenge of industrial decarbonisation is not only central to meeting the UK's net zero commitments, but also essential to ensuring the UK maintains a competitive industrial sector into the future. And so that is why I'm absolutely delighted to hand over to Chris Skidmore, Chair of the Mission Zero Coalition, who will introduce the network's key conclusions and recommendations. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Helen, for that kind introduction. Thanks to everyone for joining this sort of online launch of the new Decarbonise Now report. We'll be putting the sort of link of that into the chat box shortly. We're here at AVEVA's offices. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to do, I think, our first hybrid launch event. It's day 2 of COP28, and industrial decarbonisation is going to be a key topic over the next 2 weeks. We already have the International Decarbonisation Initiative. We have a number of breakthrough agendas, both in steel, cement, and also the Mission Possible sort of partnerships that are all focusing on this key challenge of how we can not only sort of decarbonise our heavy industries, our energy intensive industries, but sort of recognise that if we want to not just meet net zero by 2050, but importantly for countries to meet their national determined contributions for 2030, decarbonising industry sooner rather than later is absolutely essential. I'll come on to some of the detail of that in a moment. I'm delighted that we're going to have a panel discussion today. We're being joined by a number of key figures who've taken part in the report process. So from my left, I think it's your right, we have Chris Williams, who's Head of Industrial Decarbonisation Industry Wales, and also one of the founders of the South West Wales Industrial Cluster. Roy Calder, who's an Industry Principal for New Energies at AVEVA. And finally, also Dr. Anna Pultar, who's a Policy Research Officer at IDRIC, which is obviously one of the key organisations that focuses on industrial decarbonisation research at an centre that's based at Heriot-Watt University. And I'm grateful also to all the members of the Industrial Mission Zero Network for their help and support in pulling together this report that's been launched today. In terms of its overall message, Decarbonise Now says all itself, that actually we're going to secure a greener, cleaner, better industries for the future. We need to have a strategy that not only focuses on what we need to do for the longer term future, but also the short and medium term future as well. The UK's own sort of industrial sort of innovation around the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge Fund, it has focused on the cluster projects, and we're going to see from Chris on what's happening in Wales. And that has been internationally leading. We've now seen with the passage of the Energy Act, the final legislation, regulation, as Helen mentioned, are so essential for some of the business models around carbon capture and hydrogen. The challenge is that should have been in place a year ago. If it wasn't for the actions of certain ministers in my own government, we could have actually been ploughing ahead. And I think that goes to show the challenge we face is how do we ensure that we create long-term stable pathways that can be committed to a long-term mission-based approach that is away from the hands of the politicians. And I think we've seen that this already being developed, not just in the States with their own industrial decarbonisation initiatives. We've seen this develop in Germany with their own sort of 10-year guaranteed sort of hydrogen strategy that's worth billions, not millions. And I think we were beginning to see it also potentially in Keir Starmer's own energy policy around having a green industrial sort of mission. But the detail of that needs to be set out. And as we go into 2024 with a general election around the corner, we need key commitments from all political parties on how they're going to provide support for industry. That support has been wavering. We've seen, I think, from the fact that the ETS that it operates at the moment, the carbon price has halved over the last year, which doesn't provide the necessary incentives to be able to decarbonise rapidly. We need to be able to ensure that industry has certainty moving forwards. This is absolutely critical. This is what the report tries to set out. But it tries to do so by almost taking two tracks. Because on the one hand, we need that long-term support for hydrogen. We need that long-term support for carbon capture, utilisation, and storage. And recognising this will be essential for certain foundation industries, not least sort of refining. We can't do it without it. And that's something that the UNCCC and the IEA have recognised. But at the same time, those technologies will not come to the fore until the 2030s, 2040s, and 2050s. And it's absolutely right that we have that long-term plan in place, that guaranteed investment strategy that should extend beyond the initial clusters. We make recommendations in this report for actually having a plan that also recognises the challenge around dispersed sites, how to build out that network, how to look at the transportation models, the storage models, the shipping models that are needed to have a whole of a UK approach when it comes to CCUS hydrogen. But the second track that we also need to focus on is that question of how do we decarbonise now? If we look at the CCC's balanced pathway for industrial decarbonisation, roughly we have been able to decarbonise at a rate of 2% a year on our industrial emissions since 2014. And that's important. But if we were going to meet our 68% emissions reduction target for 2030, we need to up that to 8% a year. So we need to be doing 4 times the amount of emissions reduction that we're currently doing. And to achieve that, we need to use the technologies that we have today, right, at our fingertips, and make those readily available for industries. And that requires, obviously, not only strategic support, it requires investment support, and it requires the ability to join industries together to be able to recognise that they can do this. And also we need to recognise that if we're going to have the emissions trading scheme expand in the future, which is coming down the tracks, that more and more industries, more and more businesses will be affected by the need to have this ratchet mechanism on their emissions. We can't simply continue to be handing out credits as if they're some kind of indulgence, that actually we need to recognise that the ETS should be more flexible, allow for future capital investment, and to be able to give industries a sense of hope and promise, and not just be a tax that is then retained by the Treasury, that ultimately the ETS should be used as a lever for a positive approach to decarbonisation, just as in the same way we have tax credits now incentivising this in the United States. We need more carrots and less sticks if we're to be truly successful for the future. But at the same time, thinking about industrial decarbonisation, we also need to talk more about industrial electrification, have an industrial electrification strategy and a process that gives industries the opportunity. Because when it comes to decarbonising, it's already readily known that over 50% of industries that use less than 200 degrees of heat in their processing facilities can be decarbonised using electrification methods. They can be decarbonised using digitalisation methods. And the report really tries to focus on this other track. This is really important if we are to decarbonise now. I hope that everyone finds this report instructive. It's divided into 4 parts. The first is obviously to look at what the government response was to the net zero review and to see what policy recommendations have been taken up, which have not been taken up, and what are the next steps. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 then focus on the opportunity for industrial decarbonisation, recognising that we are in a global net zero race and other countries are moving ahead. We will see at COP28 over the next 2 weeks opportunities to learn from other countries, but also to partner with other countries, recognising that we are in a global supply chain and we need to find future ways to collaborate. Chapters 3 and 4 then sort of focus on not only the existing challenges and barriers that we face, not least issues of cost. How do we ensure that when it comes to our record high electricity prices, we provide a rebalancing mechanism that works for industry, but also investment support that actually allows industries and business to decarbonise without paying the price. And then finally, to focus on this international opportunity. If the UK can lead on some of the industrial net zero clusters, we can lead elsewhere in other aspects of industrial decarbonisation. And this is a prize not just around showing how the UK can be a climate leader. It's also a prize for business, a prize for industry. Because if we can create the low carbon materials, the low carbon products for the future, as future carbon markets are developing at a rapid rate, and we've seen obviously the CBAM will be introduced in Europe from January of next year. We've seen Turkey now put in place measures to be able to adapt to that CBAM and sort of follow suit. We are in a place now where net zero has gone viral. We potentially will now see the future of carbon markets similarly go viral. And there are obviously a number of initiatives coming forward. The voluntary carbon markets initiatives will be publishing new international regulatory standards at COP28. We've got to seize this moment now as UK industry, as UK business, to ensure that we can create those market opportunities, those export opportunities, as well as inward investment opportunities. The net zero review was clear that we need to take forwards decarbonisation, obviously, to tackle the climate crisis. But if we do this right, if we are able to put in place long-term certain strategies, regulation, legislation, investment strategies, we also can help lead a global market for the future. And that's the prize that is worth trying to seize. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand over to Anna Pultar from IDRIC to begin the sort of panel discussion. And what we're going to do is go into sort of questions after all the panelists have had their contributions. So please do put your question in the chat box because I'll be able to sort of pick it up. I've got a sort of iPad on my lap here. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoy the report and over to Anna.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for having us here. My name is Anna Pultar, and I'm in the policy team in IDRIC. IDRIC is the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Center. It is led by Professor Mercedes Morato-Valer up in Scotland at Heriot-Watt University, but it is a partnership of more than 30 universities across the UK. And IDRIC was set up to support the industrial decarbonisation challenge, so support the industrial clusters across the UK with research and innovation. And as Chris has already said, we need quite a systemic transformation to get industry to net zero, but also to help the wider economy to get to net zero. So research and innovation will be really crucial for this. And IDRIC has so far been able to support more than 80 research projects since we were set up a bit more than 2 years ago. And one of the key missions for IDRIC is not just to provide academically excellent research, but also to have impact. So as part of our funding through the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, it is really crucial to show, to identify the challenges that industry is facing on the ground and to help industry on the ground to. IDRIC provides research across the technology portfolio. So anything to do with developing and advancing low carbon and zero carbon fuels and feedstocks used in industry and manufacturing processes, technologies needed to tackle the emissions that are rising in some industrial processes directly, such as in steel and cement, but also in advancing the infrastructure and network needed for hydrogen, CCUS, but also, of course, electrification and many other areas, circular economy practices and so on. IDRIC is technology neutral. There's no one size fits all of the technology that is needed. We need a combination of things, and actually our experiences in working with industry shows that industry is deploying or is looking to deploy a combination of techniques and approaches. So it's really crucial that research and innovation supports this. And as Chris was saying, we need both the kind of the innovation in these areas that we will need in 2030, 2040, 2050, but we also need innovation and research to make sure the technology that is already there is becoming more efficient, more effective, and works for industry on the ground to do things now. So IDRIC does a lot of research in technology, but not just in technology. We'll need much more than that. We need a systemic transformation. So lots of things needed. Getting the markets right and financial incentives so that investment in these technologies can be made and can be de-risked. Also ensuring that the skills and the supply chains are developed, that technologies are integrated in local and national energy systems, that the right regulation and standards are in place, environmental monitoring. And very importantly also that this decarbonisation journey has public consent and has the social license to operate. So we are lucky to have excellent research across many universities looking at all these important questions across the kind of industrial decarbonisation value chain. One really important aspect is also not just to produce groundbreaking research, but also to bring it together. So one key function of IDRIC to bring this knowledge base together and make it accessible to the industry involved, the policymakers on UK level, on in the involved administrations of local government, but also to the wider public, so that everyone kind of has the knowledge they need to play the kind of critical part in this transition. And this is also something that's really important for the policy work in IDRIC, which I'm quite heavily involved in, where we really try to bring, as you like, the embodied knowledge together. So all the people, all the experts that are involved in this, academic experts, industry leaders, but also key people in government, in regulating bodies that have such a crucial role to play. And coordinating this transition is really one of the challenges. And it will be a key challenge to, on a kind of system side, on the supply side, if you will, the networks we need for hydrogen, CCUS. At the moment, the big debate about grid, the electricity grid, that needs to be massively developed, expanded, and enforced. But one key challenge that we have identified also in the dialogue with our stakeholders is to link that up with the demand side, and to really understand what all the hundreds and thousands of industrial and manufacturing sites need, where they're at, and how they can link into the infrastructure, how they can get the knowledge and technology they need, and also issues around planning and permitting. So there's loads of challenges, and no organization can know all of this, but it's really crucial to bring everyone together and to expand our kind of knowledge and coordination in that space. And we will hear more from Chris about the industrial clusters as a key approach for trying to bring these two levels together and then enable the coordination of key stakeholders. And just one last thing, from me and IDRIC, we are keen to support this and to extend the knowledge of how these place-based approaches can really overcome some of these challenges. And if any one of you is at COP next week, we are hosting a workshop with international partners and looking into kind of best practices from different places, and in particularly also how this could help to support the decarbonisation of industry in the global south, which obviously is also a key importance and challenge. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Anna, and I'm sure we can take that offline to make sure that anyone's interested in IDRIC's work, but also some of the convening that you're taking forwards. They're welcome to be involved. A couple of people in the chat box have sort of said, how can we be involved in a couple of areas? So some great connections potentially being formed in the future. I'm now going to turn to Chris Williams. Chris, thanks for joining us. Thank you. Chris is obviously going to talk about his work with the South Wales industrial cluster, and hopefully sort of pick up some of the challenges and opportunities that presents for industrial decarbonisation. Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge Fund funding, which Chris mentioned earlier. It really took us from in an industrial area that spans the whole of South Wales. We include nearly all the sectors that you could list. We didn't really have a collective group at all or regional plan on how we were going to decarbonise. And thanks to the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, we now do. Over 2 years, it convened and collaborated and developed a plan for what we thought we can reasonably get to net zero by 2040, as long as we had 30 policy drivers met. It was a £30 billion investment plan, looking to protect over 100,000 employees that bring in 6 billion GVA to the local economy. So it was a hugely important plan for us. And of those 30 policy drivers, it's great to see a whole number of them included in the report that's published today. I think policy driver 1 is the importance of competitive electricity pricing. UK manufacturing struggles so much, and if only we had competitive electricity pricing, it would unlock so much investment and so many opportunities and bring in so much. It will help solve many problems that our industries have at the moment. Policy driver 2 related then to CCS and our challenge. We don't have local storage of CO2, so we need CO2 shipping to be initiated. It's recognised that's a whole opportunity, an investment opportunity for the UK as it ties in with Europe in terms of exploiting the CCS capabilities, the UK. So it's good to see again that the request and the recommendation that government pushes harder and develops. When speaking to the Track 1 clusters, it's keen that we get on and make those and take those through to final investment decision as early as possible. Track 1 expansion, we need to get moving. Track 2, we need to get moving. And also the recommendation about visioning and working with the public on public acceptance will help so much in making these projects and get them happen in terms of getting through planning and consenting. So that overall visioning piece of presenting to the public what net zero UK looks like will help bring investment. Policy driver 25 on our list. We have some of the best universities in the world. We really need to make sure we're exploiting those to help us with our transition, which is what IDRIC has been so good at doing in the last 2 years. And we hope, and we like the recommendation, that needs to continue through until 2050, ideally, but follow with the 2030 recommendation. Policy driver 5 we had on our list was around the support needed for electrification. So it's great to see In fact, I think it's a landmark day today for the UK, hopefully, with a recommendation that electrification plan is launched next year. I think that's going to be hugely important for the UK. We've got the huge push for hydrogen, the huge push for CCUS. Having now this momentum around electrification will unlock and be so important for SWIC, but also then the wider UK. In fact, I think 8 of the recommendations relate to electrification, which is great to see. So in terms then of opening that out wider for the UK in electrification, as I said, I think today is almost a great day for industrial electrification, with the recognition that that plan needs to be developed. You know, with DESNZ, with the industrial decarbonisation strategy quite clearly showing that electrification will be the dominant technology used by industry. With DESNZ consultation out this year, there's several electrification projects going on in the UK at the moment through Heineken, Bridvic using heat pumps, Tata Steel and Corby with induction heating, and many, many more that have had IETF and other innovation funding from the UK government to get them understood and start them on their investment cycle. But they're really just the tip of the iceberg. And as soon as we get this momentum moving for electrification, the opportunities are huge, as shown in the industrial decarbonisation strategy. I think as industry, we need to come together to develop a common voice. We need to support government. So a group of us are trying to create that voice at the moment and work out the best way. So we've got CCSA for CCS, we've got Hydrogen UK. We need something for a voice from industry on electrification in order to support policy development, but also to share and learn and develop and accelerate supply chain skills and technology. We need to develop, to back that up then, a research and innovation programme for electrification for industry. So again, a group of us are trying to pull together to develop that research and innovation programme, utilising the catapults, and we like again the recommendations in the report for the Made Electrified, something we hadn't come up with, so we'll understand how that can come together. So when you look at a manufacturing facility, it's combusting gas at the moment. You can electrify, you could hydrogen, or you could CCS. Picking and driving this electrification is not anti-hydrogen, it's not anti-CCUS. It's merely to show how they all fit together and work in a complementary way. Different industries in different regions will have different strengths and different opportunities, different infrastructure. So we need to make sure an industry can make the right choice for it in its region. And that industry in a different region might choose a different option. So it's important we develop and grow that policy and strength and momentum behind industrial electrification. Of course, behind that, I'll come back again to competitive electricity pricing for the UK in comparison to Europe in particular. We need that to happen urgently. We need, as recommended, CFD or business model support for CapEx, OpEx for electrification projects. Grid, we need to focus on grid, and that's not just for electrification, that's also for hydrogen and CCUS. The huge supply chain for electrification challenges that will come as we all start to electrify, as we all start to look for hydrogen, as we all start developing further our CCUS in terms of power electronics, grid, etc. All that supply chain challenge and opportunity needs to be skilled and mapped. But by creating that voice and that research and innovation programme, just like has happened for hydrogen and CCUS, we'll start to get that whole UK picture, and that whole challenge will start to be understood. And of course, we'll need gigawatts of additional electricity, and not just when it's windy and sunny. And that again is when the whole hydrogen and CCUS debate comes together. So we have electrification, hydrogen and CCUS working together as that whole systems approach we develop our way forward. So hopefully today and the recommendations mark as a landmark for manufacturing in the UK in terms of the push for electrification. Come back to the reminder about the the need for competitive electricity pricing. And I just finished by thanking the team for putting together the report. There's so much information, so much going on. It's good to see a report that pulls that all together for us all every now and again. We can reflect and ask and look for gaps. So thank you for the report.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for your kind remarks about the report. And I think good to see from yourselves sort of recognising, that dual challenge around electrification and why we focus so much on that in the report, not at the expense of CCUS and hydrogen and the clusters, but bringing together a universal, holistic approach towards decarbonisation, both in the near term and the long term. I'm going to turn now to Roy Calder. Roy, thanks very much for joining us as industry principal for new energies at AVEVA. I'm delighted to hear from you about where you see sort of the strategic future of industrial decarbonisation.
So, Chris, thanks very much. I think I had the most challenging approach of being fifth, because I've been sitting here going through my notes in my head and going, yep, they've talked about that, they've talked about that. So I'm having to do this slightly on the hop, so to speak. If we look at the global issue of decarbonisation, and Chris was talking very much about how far we are behind here in the UK. McKinsey is reporting that globally, we're an order of magnitude behind in terms of decarbonising, where we need to be for 2030, let alone 2050. So I'm glad to see that the report is actually saying that there are projects, there are ways going forward in which we can actually achieve here in the UK better than some of the other regions around the world. But there is a very clear capability now to look at the 2030 goal, because the 2030 goal will not necessarily be driven purely by CapEx. It will be driven by the OpEx side as well. So how do you drive decarbonisation from an OpEx side when you're not going to be using capital funds? And it comes about using the data that you have within your organisation, within your supply chain, to actually look at how you decarbonise through efficiency and also electrification and novel technologies. So the approach that AVEVA supports not only covers engineering sides, but also the data management side and the data visualization. So if you as an industry want to understand what your needs are, you need to understand what your emissions are, you need to understand your process, you need to understand the data that you have already, and also the data that is available within the rest of your supply chain. So I'm talking about where you're getting your electricity from. What is the carbon footprint of that electricity? What is the carbon footprint of your downward side supply chain, where you've got the transportation that has got to be built into your carbon model for your products? And this is where joining data across organizations, across the country, is going to be key to driving these sort of improvements based on digitization. And I think it's good to see that companies such as AVEVA and others out there are looking at pulling that data together. You know, we've got all these data lakes that are being put together by AWS and Microsoft, etc. But the data in there is only good if you can actually access it and utilize it to drive that decarbonisation approach. I heard Chris talking about the economics of the electricity being an issue here, but it's also the issue of where are we getting our electricity from. There's been an awful lot of poor public perception about our green renewable electricity over recent months, where people are reporting that wind turbines are being paid not to produce electricity. That is part of an issue that we need to address. But at the same time, we need to have a better handle on what the availability is going to be for that renewable electricity as we bring it into our processes, as we bring it into our house. And that is down to predictive capabilities, bringing the approach of advanced AI type approaches to predict weather more accurately, where the wind turbines are or where the solar panels are, so that you can feed that data down through that upstream supply chain into the process industry, so that we know what our products, what their green footprint, how we can certify that green product approach through the data chain that leads down to the customer side. And that goes to the carbon approach that Chris was talking about earlier. I think from AVEVA's point of view, we know where we have to go. We are talking to industry today, but there needs to be a step change. There really needs to be a step change in the very near future to actually drive that forward for British industry and for the supply side. And I think that we're starting to see that upclick in the people that we're talking to, especially in the industrial hubs. Also the industrial hubs that have not necessarily got all the funding they would like from government. That's life. But what we're also seeing on a global basis is that the hub approaches are becoming more broad focused. You know, we're actually starting to see not only the 7 hubs that we've seen in the US, but the hubs that weren't approved by the Biden administration. They're saying, hey, wait a minute, the economics do work, even if we don't get support. And I would like to see that same philosophy carrying on here in areas where you are not part of a hub, but you need to understand how you can work together, create your own hubs, supported by a data model that allows you to understand how you can decarbonize efficiently. Unfortunately, I was preempted on a lot of what I was going to say by everybody around me, including Helen. Thank you very much, Helen. So I will close on that, if you don't mind, Chris, and hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Morgan, and again, thanks to AVEVA for making this sort of hybrid event today possible. We've got a number of questions that come in the chat.